The United Nations has declared the current year as World Communications Year, the object of which is to highlight the spectacular advance made in communications technology and information services, as also the tremendous potential they hold out for stimulating economic and social progress. Human history, in essence, is the story of man's unceasing efforts to discover more and more effective and speedy means to communicate with ever-widening circles of his fellow men. The appearance of newspapers about 300 years ago has ushered in an era of mass communications, and the mankind has been continuously going through the communications revolution ever since. During the past 100 years, the inventions of telegraph, photography, telephone, radio, television, and transistor have imparted increasing momentum to this revolution, which, with the development of new technologies during the past few decades, has now become one of the mightiest forces ever unleashed. We have, however, yet to grasp the full implications on the impact of this revolution on human mind and institutions. It has created the possibility of making information and knowledge easily accessible to the common man, but it has also made communications a formidable weapon of enslavement and indoctrination in the hands of power hungry rulers. It is in this context that consideration of the Gandhian approach becomes necessary. Fortunately, the question whether Gandhiji is relevant today has no longer remained debatable. More and more thinkers in both the developed as well as the developing world have now begun to acknowledge the validity of Gandhian thought in the conditions obtaining today. The unprecedented response evoked by the Gandhi film and the departments for Gandhian studies being established in different universities and academic institutions in the West have been among the significant pointers to the growing interest in Gandhi in the advanced industrial democracies. This interest has been growing because Gandhiji had clearly anticipated the problems, both material and spiritual, the industrial civilization is facing today. Secondly, all over the world, the people confronted with weapons of mass destruction on the one hand and the growing power of the state on the other are groping for ways for non-violent social and political change, and only Gandhian thought and technique provide a reliable guide for such action. Gandhiji, who was able to communicate effectively with millions of people in India and abroad, was the master communicator the modern world has ever seen. Gandhiji lived before the dawn of the space age and could not use radio, television, or other sophisticated means of communication. He communicated directly with his countrymen. He primarily used written or spoken words to convey his message. But his travels, padayatras, his public and prayer meetings, and even his silences and fasts were among his means of communication. He was one of the most effective publicists and journalists. He wrote books and pamphlets to propagate his views. The success of his South African struggle was due as much to the spiritual methods of Satyagraha he adopted as to his resourcefulness in putting across the case of the Indians in South Africa through statements, pamphlets, and public meetings to the people and authorities in England and India. 35 years after Gandhiji's passing away, we are now beginning to discover the relevance of Gandhiji's approach to economic development. The emphasis now being placed on development of rural and other backward areas, promotion of small-scale industries, creation of employment opportunities in villages, propagation of rural and appropriate technologies, and the use of alternative or renewable sources of energy. All these underline the belated realization of the validity of Gandhiji's teachings and the consequent attempts to correct the imbalance in our planning, which all these years sought to emulate the Western model of development. In the field of labor management relations, the concept of trusteeship has been Gandhiji's most valuable and lasting contribution. Instead of trying to bring about socio-economic transformation through institutional change, Gandhiji, true to his faith in true and non-violence, sought to achieve the ends of equality and justice, especially through change of heart. We desired that each individual should use his talent, power, or riches as a trust for the good of society. The trusteeship principle thus envisages non-violent and voluntary surrender, or at least limitations of the use of one's wealth, power, or talent in the larger social interest. The principle applies to each and every individual and sections of society, especially those who have talents or wield any kind of power, economic, political, or intellectual, professional, or trade union power. Trusteeship thus presupposes a fundamental change in attitude of all sections. It cannot be applied in isolation and requires a general moral climate conducive to bring about this attitudinal change. Such a climate is obviously lacking at present, and we would require a leader of really high moral stature to inspire people make such an experiment on a significant scale. Till such a climate is created, we should consciously try at least to foster a spirit of cooperation between labor and management and government. Gandhiji was thus successful in communicating with people because of his message. It was simple and easily understood by the people, as it was based on the universal moral values enshrined in all religions. Besides, Gandhiji not only propagated these values, he sincerely tried to imbibe them in his own personal life and incorporated them in the policies and programs he formulated. His success was thus due to his moral appeal, which could evoke instant and enthusiastic response among the people. His technique was thus the same age-old technique practiced by saints and sages throughout the centuries. At the same time, Gandhiji was a practical idealist. He was aware of human imperfections and failings and was always willing to compromise and proceed in stages towards his goal. He was moreover a man of action and could inspire the people to involve themselves in his programs in a spirit of selfless dedication. This inspiration, which is still alive and effective, has been responsible for building up a large body of devoted constructive workers who are even today silently working in different parts of the country. If therefore one wants to understand the Gandhian technique of communication, one has to try to understand the message of Gandhiji, which was inseparable from his technique.